And here we go, the first official episode of the Indie Side, where we talk to authors, illustrators, and editors who work independently. Today is Sue Mansbridge, and we've already been chatting before we started. Sue, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, hello. I'm a fantasy author. Um, Wanted to be a writer forever, but for various reasons, life got in the way. But now I'm living my dream, which is absolutely wonderful. I have 6 books out in the world, self-published, and I have another 6 that I'm working on in various different stages at the moment. So yeah, really just loving what I'm doing right now.
Now, you had mentioned that in an email as well, that you had many irons in the fire.
Yeah.
6 projects going on all at once. Are at least a few of them together, or are they 6 separate projects?
Um, so the Child Blade, which is my latest book, came out this summer, and it's a quadrilogy. So 3 of those 6 books are the next chapters of that ongoing story. I have I decided to have a little go at doing cozy murder mysteries, which has been quite good fun. So I have 2 of those, and I've got plans to write a third one coming up in November. And I have a book of short stories that I'm contributing to whenever. It started off as a little bit of a practice, I think, because I always write third person.
Okay.
So I wanted to try writing in different points of view. So decided just to write a few stories purely as practice to see how that would work and stuff to and it worked out quite well. I produced I think it was about 8 to 10 stories to start with, and they all kind of vaguely fit in. Well, they didn't to start with, but I've made it so that they all start slotting in. So characters from one story make a brief appearance in another, that kind of thing. Uh, so yeah, so that's an ongoing project, which I don't know when it will see the light of day, to be honest. It'll just be in when I feel I've got enough stories to fill a book, I think.
Oh, I hear that. And you know what? It is a convenient way to put things out. I did one for last November, and then I did another one. They're there when you're ready. You can come back to them. You know
Yes.
what I mean? They're there when you're ready. Um, Now you had dabbled in several genres here. Do you favor any genre though?
Fantasy is
Yeah.
my main genre, and even the cozy murder mysteries have a fantasy flavor to them. So there's a little sprinkling of magic in there as well. So yeah, that's my main genre, really.
With the short stories, it
Definitely.
is interesting because I feel like that's how I built up the stamina to write a novel. Before we started, I was telling you about the novel I had written, and it began as 2 short stories. And do you feel like short stories helped you build stamina or show you that, wait a minute, I think I can stack these on top of each other and make something bigger?
Um, I cut my writing well, yeah, I I did do a bit of writing. I trained as a nurse, and after I had finished my 3 years of training, I had some downtime, started writing on a typewriter, this epic um, trilogy that has not seen the light of day since for a lot of reasons, a lot of good reasons. Um, but as I was working, um, I actually started writing fan fiction, and Ellie also said last time that she did the same. So I think that really helped me to kind of do didn't you didn't have to think about the world or the characters. You could just think about the story and what you were putting these people through and developing crafting that way. And so I think that was part of it, and you kind of release the next chapter whenever it is you wrote it. So eventually it would work its way into a bigger um, a bigger project. And I did a few kind of shorter stories that were like one chapter long or something, just uh, and that actually was really helpful because it helped you to kind of work out like in English lessons, for instance. Oh, and I not only was I a nurse, I was a teaching assistant and did also some supply teaching and stuff like that. So when you're looking at English lessons with kids, and I think it's these days they all they think about is the films. So if you give them a prompt, when I was there, it was all Harry Potter.
Mhm.
Everybody had Harry Potter stories. Um, but they were always things like, so we did this, and then we met with our friends and we said, oh, what are we going to do? And we said, well, let's go down here. So we went down here, and then we met somebody else and they didn't want to do what we wanted to do. So we were kind of wondering what to do. And it was all so boring. And it's only when you read boring stories that you know, actually, I need to interject something in here that's going to keep the reader interested, you know. And so you start really working on how to craft stories. And I think it also helps reading. I read from a very young age. I could read before I went to school. My mum taught me. And I was always way above my reading age when it yeah, no, yes, my reading age was always way above my age, sorry. Um, and so I started reading big books, like proper novels, long before other in my my age group they were just on the kind of red readers or whatever it was that they were doing in those days. And I was feasting on these novels, and very early on, it was the fantasy ones that grabbed me. And yeah, so
What was the first one to grab you? What was the first book to truly pull you in?
The Wizard of Earthsea, Ursula Le Guin.
Okay.
It was well, it was a trilogy at the time. My mother bought it for me. I've still got it, and I read it a couple of years ago, actually, and it was quite surprising um, how much of it still resonated with me and how much I loved it. What I remembered of that story, and definitely made me want to create my own worlds and, you know, have that kind of magic in my worlds. It was just lovely.
Well, we mentioned world building before on the first video. Now, because of you sent me a little bit to read, and so I wanted to transition to world building because I noticed in the two samples there were similarities, but there were also two slightly different world building styles. Where
Okay.
uh, the Charred Blade, it's built in the narrative, whereas in the other sample you gave me, it was built in the narrative break. And I got to tell you, the way you delivered in the letter really pulled me into that. And I was, when I got to the end of it, it's like, okay, you have created something here that really wants to make a person read more. So could you talk about execution in either of those?
I don't believe I wouldn't call myself a big world builder. My books aren't that huge. I know part of what you were talking about last time with Ellie was how big everything was and how you had to come up with these huge political systems and religious systems and things. I don't do that. Um, the way I build my worlds is through ordinary people getting caught up in extraordinary
Mhm.
events. And what you find out about the world is just through the way they live their lives, the conversations they have. I never go into great exposition about anything. My first trilogy, for instance, there is a religious element to it, but the whole practice has been around for so long. It's almost, excuse me, it's almost as if it's not really there anymore. There are things that people say and do um, referencing it, but actually it's not a very active kind of religion. Whereas I did a prequel for those three books, and there the religion was a very active thing. It was very much a big part of the mages' lives and stuff like that. So I did kind of open that up a bit more in that book. But yeah, so my world building comes through how people um, interact
Mhm.
with that world. But other than that, I don't go into a big effort to tell you all about the geography and the political status of stuff.
No, but dialogue
So
does sort of move it forward. The
yeah,
dialogue and the narrative. See, and there's nothing wrong with that style of minimalism because you're not always, if you automatically want to know what's going on, then you've built enough world. If the reader
yeah,
automatically and I'm not going to give away any of your books, but the Charred Blade, it opens up. There's something we need to keep an eye on immediately. No backstory. We just have to wait. We just have to wait for whatever we're given. And so that's why I was saying that's sort of world building through narrative. But again, in the
mm.
other sample, tell me the name again. I'm sorry.
The
The,
infilling.
the infilling. I was about to say that there's this pause in the narrative where you do a little world building, and it was a very strong technique. And I look
Thank you.
forward to that one because there's a lot going on in that book. Do you want to, now that we've taken this sort of a break from it, I noticed also both characters are overworked. They're just overworked and practically fed up, but they're incredibly benevolent. They're overworked. Here's my notes: overworked, benevolent, hiding a secret.
Sounds about right.
All right. Well, that was a commonality between those two, and
Yeah.
it's strange how they were both presented differently, but yet there was that same encouragement where it's like, okay, this is a decent person. I don't have to worry about that. You
Mm.
know, do you put yourself into those characters? I know that's such a goofball question. I'm sure it goes on every podcast or whatever, but there is this pattern of a type of human being that I noticed and appreciated.
I think for me, the values that I believe in are the things that I put into my books. And for instance, honesty and integrity are incredibly important to me. They really are. So I think for me, my characters actually have that inbuilt into them, my main characters. Um, and in fact, for Finn, who is my main character in the Charge Blade, um, one of the things he finds out quite early on is that he's been lied to his whole life. He's been lied to. And the people who he thought were his friends are something different. Or are they something different? Are they still his friends? And this is something he works through in the first book. Uh, has to come up against lots of kind of um, because he has no memory of what came before, or very only a few memories that he ends up with. He's kind of trying to work things out as he goes along. And who do you trust? You know, when you're basically all alone, and it seems that nobody has been honest with you.
I apologize for that. We're having some bandwidth issues. You were talking about not being able to trust the people around you, Finn, in the Charred Blade. Now, you can tell us as much as you want. However, you said this was part of a bigger series, correct?
Yes, it'll be four books in the
Okay,
end.
total. And where does this one fall? This is the first one?
This is the first. Yes.
Okay, now how long is this one? How long have you been at work on this one?
I usually work on my books probably for 2 to 3 years before they come out into the world, going through various stages. So it's a long kind of process that I go through. The second book now is out for beta readers. I've had a couple of people go through it chapter by chapter, giving me feedback. then I kind of go through it again, read it, then send it out to my beta readers so they can look at it as a whole book. And from there, I'll edit it right down to almost to the point where it's public, ready for publication. Get a last look at it by my friend who does a kind of proofread of it.
Mhm.
Uh, so yeah, so it is a long process, but I think it's a good process. I know that there are people who can produce books, like within 6 weeks or something. For me, I can't do that. If I want to give my best work, I need to give it a lot of time and a lot of reading through and feedback from people. So, yeah,
We can bridge with that topic because I think that's why we both chose Amazon, right? Is
yeah,
that
yeah,
it's when I did my first books, it was purely for the sake of saying, hey, you over, because I'm in Thailand. Hey, you over there, read this, tell me what you think, and I can make changes because it's on Kindle, you know. Now, you and I both agree that Amazon is a useful tool. Why else do you
yeah.
feel like it has been useful with what you've done so far?
I think the Amazon make it pretty easy, although it is still a pain in lots of
Mhm.
ways. But they do make it easy to go in to upload your books, to check whether things are okay, to re-upload. You can re-upload your book over and over and over and over and over again until it looks good, until it looks right. Um, if people kind of, I had somebody say to me, "Did you realise that this? I don't know whether it was a typo. I can't remember now. Was in the book?" And I was like, "No, I didn't." Okay, fix it, upload it again, and it's just wonderful for that. I see Ingram Sparks is a completely different way of formatting. You can't just take what you've done for Amazon and just shove it on Ingram Sparks. You have to reformat it in a different way, and they have different ways of doing stuff. And honestly, I just think to myself, I'm too old to be messing about.
I get tired
To
of
give it
learning new
to
stuff sometimes, you know what I mean? By the
Yeah,
time I learn the Amazon system, don't tell me there's another system.
no, I'm not in Kindle. I'm not in Amazon Select, so I do have the choice if I want to of going later on. I might, I don't know. But actually, what benefit does it give you? Well, you can go into libraries and bookstores. Yes, you can. However, they don't promote that. You have to physically go in and try and persuade them to take your book on. And unfortunately, if they do take your book and it doesn't sell, they send it back and you are liable for the whole cost. So you get paid your royalties, but you're liable for the whole cost when it comes back. And I'm sorry, I'm not rich. I've got no money to spend on my books as it is, least of all for people sending books back again. So no, no, that's not something that really. Maybe who knows, later on in the future that they might make changes, they might do things differently, and then it might be a viable source. I know there's things like draft to digital and things like that, and I've heard of another publishing company that does a very similar thing to the self-published side that Amazon does. Maybe in the future those will be worth looking at. I don't know. Certainly, I know other people like Ellie have gone down the road of actually doing it all the work themselves as a publishing company.
Right.
And again, I'm not interested in doing that for myself. Maybe at some point in the future, I might consider it for my books. I don't know. But certainly for me, Amazon, it's easy, it's very user friendly, and actually it can be accessed by anybody all
Yeah.
over the world. So, you know,
Well, I can
what
attest
more
to
could you
that
ask for?
because like I said, this was the only way in the beginning of getting people to read. For the handful of friends that had a Kindle, I figured they would be kind enough. And it was the same with you. Like, hey, there's a couple of errors here so I could fix it. And
Yeah.
guess what? You still have a copy and it's fixed. I appreciated
Yes.
that, especially in the beginning, because I'm rarely a person who does stuff in order. So it also allowed me to make just a ton of my own mistakes. And sometimes that's what you want.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I know people knock Amazon, but I think they've done a wonderful thing for people like me who, I tried before I went through to do this self-publishing. I did try going down the traditional route, got in contact with loads of agents. Nobody was interested. Um, in fact, the infilling, which is quite interesting, I was writing that, and as there used to be a Winchester Writers kind of festival here. And when COVID came, they did it all online, and they had a kind of taster package that they brought up, which I actually went for because it was within my budget. The following year, I actually wrote to them and said, "Are you doing this again? Because I think it was wonderful." And they said, "Well, we're thinking of doing a new thing, which is called the Writers' Circle." So the idea was that you signed up for this, you were put in a group, and for 5 weeks, you met once a week and just kind of critiqued each other's work. And at the end of the 5 weeks, you were given a 15-minute interview with an agent of your choice, which I thought was brilliant. And so I actually ended up with an agent who was my number one on my list, who I hadn't sent any submission to at that point, because I just thought, he's the number one guy. And he was very damning about my book. He said, the first thing he said to me, you shouldn't do prologues. Prologues are no good. And I said, well, it's not a prologue. It's a letter about somebody's different world. As a result of that, I actually then changed the order. So you get the main chapter with Luann and her life first before you get the letter. And I did it that way. But then he was saying, dark urban fantasy, nobody's reading that anymore. And then he said, because of COVID, publishers aren't taking on any new customers. They've got a backlog of books that they need to bring out. So, it's no good even thinking about publishing for at least another 2 years, so you can refine the book for 2 years. And I sat there and I thought, why am I bothering? Really? He was supposed to have read the chapters that I'd sent. It was obviously hadn't particularly read them. He said to me, if you want to know anything about multiple points of view, you should read something like George R.R. Martin. I thought, I have read George R.R. Martin. I know what he did. And yeah, so the whole thing was incredibly depressing, and I just felt so low afterwards. So what was the point then of being a writer? Nobody was going to read my stuff if it was about what was popular at the moment, which is what traditional publishers are looking for. They don't want a good story. They want something that's going to sell and make them money. That's all they care about. So I kind of sat there and I thought, well, I don't really want to be part of that anymore. Then if that's the way you're going to treat me and my stories, and that's when I thought, do you know what, I'm gonna start self-publishing, and that's what I did.
You waited for those 15 minutes and they didn't have anything productive to say. That is kind of a bummer. I found myself in a similar position when I paid some money, and really all I got was just pointing out all the areas where I'm using not so productive language while not highlighting what was positive and what was productive. It's the
Yeah,
novel we were talking about beforehand, and it was the way you presented your critique makes me feel like this thing isn't redeemable at all. Now, I'm not paying you to tell me nice things, but at the same time, it sounds like we had a similar experience, and
yeah,
therefore both chose Amazon for that reason. Ellie and I talk about gatekeepers a lot, and they're out there.
yes, oh
And,
yeah,
to be honest with you, this is always any of the stuff I do is supposed to be anti-gatekeeper anyway. And so there's no gatekeepers stopping Ellie from posting this. So let's talk about what you
Absolutely.
have out there because you've got your work on display behind you. So tell us what you have out there right now and any detail that you'd like to share.
So my first trilogy starts off with Master and Apprentice. That was the first book I wrote. Uh, and interestingly, I mentioned COVID before about some of the things that were good about COVID. The biggest big thing for me about COVID was I printed off my manuscript after sending it to all these agents and getting nothing back, sat in my conservatory with my red pen and really went through it and actually cut out. I just was putting crosses through so much of it. And I was thinking, I'm never going to even have a book left at the end of this. But it was so interesting to me how much I had changed and how much I'd learnt just in that couple of years of writing my book. You know, I'd learnt such a lot. So that was the first one that went through a major edit before I actually published it. Um, and that is about magic had been split into three different disciplines. So you had earth magic, which was about like rocks, the soil, metals, and weather working. You have what I called anima magic, which is basically all living creatures. From insects right up to human beings, and then you have green magic, which is the one that I focus on in the book, which is all about growing things and things like that. And the idea is that all of these different disciplines are kept apart because it's too dangerous to have one person know it all. And in actual fact, my prequel, Mage Wars, which I did after my trilogy, looks at when the magic was split and why. So that's the big thing. So Master and Apprentice is about Reese, who is a young lad. He's been apprenticed to the Master of Green Magic, and it's about him learning his craft, about him making mistakes, and growing into his learning, how he's quite an innocent. So when he ends up in the big city as part of his going around the country that he has to do later on in his apprenticeship, he is really like a fish out of water, but learns a lot. And once a year, they come together, the three masters with their apprentices, to kind of look at the world in general, what kind of things that they need to do together in order to solve problems. So the first book is him becoming and learning, and then can't really say too much about the rest of it because books 2 and 3 are then about him actually ending up learning the other magics for a reason and becoming quite powerful. So that's the first 3. The Mage War is about the split in magic, how it came, and that follows a librarian called Vrainan Hamevna, and it's her story really, and how she becomes the first master of green magic. So that's that one. And it was quite funny. I didn't have the idea for the prequel, only came when I was writing the 3rd book. And from then I kind of had this picture in my head. My books always start off with a picture in my head of how it's going to start. And the picture was of this woman walking down this huge iron steps and the lights turning on into this incredibly huge library. And that was her kingdom, as it were. And I kind of thought to myself, yeah, that's quite good. And because I had at that point not published the trilogy, I was able to put in some foreshadowing into the trilogy, um, or even or backing up stuff which would reference stuff that would come in the prequel. So that was quite cool. Makes me look very clever, I think.
I got to
um,
interject though. That is the benefit of writing in clusters.
yeah,
Because I have a friend who's not releasing one book at a time. She's got this group of 12, and it didn't start as 12. It was just we're maneuvering, we're making room for this, and we're making room. Why did this happen? Oh, we got to nudge some room over here. Those nudges become books, right?
yes, definitely, definitely. So yeah, so that was the very first thing. Then the infilling came. That's just a standalone
Okay, that one
that was
that
a
I read
story.
was okay,
Yes. And now I'm on my quadrilogy.
right?
I presume it is called, 4 books. The Childblade, which is the first one of that. So yeah.
And you plan on staying busy with this.
Yes, I actually have an idea for another series of books. I want them all to be kind of individual books, but with the same character, so you can pick up any of them and read the story, although her character will develop throughout each of the books. I don't know how many that's going to be.
Okay.
I've got an idea of the first one, how that's going to work. And again, this picture, I always start off with a picture in my head, is the
Mhm.
very beginning of the book. I always think of the ending, how I want it to finish. The rest of it's a bit of a muddy middle mystery. I am a pantser, so I don't plot my books out. I just write and see what happens.
I mean, sometimes that's you just see where your imagination goes, I guess. Is there a genre that you would want to dabble in that you haven't dabbled in yet?
Um, I don't know. I don't think I would be any good at like romance, really. Um, I read romance just as a bit of a down thing, just to come down a bit and not have to think too hard. Uh, but no, I don't think I would go into any kind of romanticy type of thing. Not into horror,
It's
thrillers,
funny.
anything like that.
A romanticy was a new thing to me. I
Yeah.
don't know where that came from, but no, we I think like my wife's favorite show over here could be considered a romanticy, so I guess I get it. All right, well, last thing, because we're all indie here and we're at various stages in our career, you're showing everybody that you can start this whenever you want. Now, outside of that, you're also showing that you can make your own world and not follow anybody else's rules. You can publish things
Yeah.
without being restricted. All right. So, how about some encouragement to people who want to start this?
Oh gosh, when I first started, I didn't know anybody um, who was there was one other person who was a writer. She, after I met her and started giving her, examples of my work, she actually moved to Uganda, which was, and then I was back alone again. But we kept in touch. We email a lot, and she's still part of my, what I would call my writing tribe. My first beta readers were my sister and my niece and my best friend. And after book 2, they kind of dropped off. So I was desperately in need of finding people, I think. And that actually was where social media became a good thing. It did put me in touch with other authors. I talked about the writing circle that formed in the COVID. We actually, 4 of us kept that on afterwards. And although Jonathan, who writes sci-fi, he kind of drifted off after a while, but the other two who are fantasy writers as well stayed with me. And we meet once a month, and they've been invaluable in giving me feedback for my work. So that was a real great thing. Um, I think the other way I found people, they do, especially in America, they do a lot of online summits. Um, Many of them are kind of for advertising. So I did Pro Writing Aid, did a fantasy week. And so I went on and I kind of listened to some of the talks and things, but just happened in the chat to notice one of the people that were there, they were saying they had a Discord group of fantasy writers and, was anybody interested? So I thought, well, that sounds quite cool. So I joined them. I joined another Discord group as well, but they were more gamers. So actually, we weren't a good fit, really. So I kind of came out of that one. But the other Discord group, who love Discworld as well, actually, they have become fast friends, are wonderful for kind of getting on and talking through if you find a sticky issue you need to kind of work through. They're great at brainstorming stuff with you and helping you out. They're great at beta reading my work, great at pointing me to different things that I didn't know about, different resources and stuff like that. So that has been a valuable part of my growing. And I don't believe you have to have loads of money. I read a post from a girl who said she got disheartened because they said you needed at least £5,000 to kind of create a book. And I said to her, no, you don't. I said, doesn't mean to say just because I can't afford loads of editors and things like that, cover designers, doesn't mean you can't bring out a good book. You just have to be a little bit more innovative about how you do things and make some good connections, get people in who are going to be, helpful. And that's one of the things about the writing community that I love. Generally speaking, it is a very supportive community. In the independent writing community is brilliant. So yeah, I'd say, yes, write your books, make those connections that are going to mean things, who are going to walk with you through it, who are going to be honest with you when your book isn't working, because the other thing is, friends and family, they're lovely, but very often they go, oh, it's really good. And actually, that's not what you want. You don't want somebody who's just going to tell you it's really good. You want someone who's going to say it's good, but I think this and needs a bit more work.
Well, you're definitely onto something there because it's the only reason I've got any of my projects off the ground. It's the only reason we're doing this right here. And
Yes.
I did have two different instances where a person did tell me you should deliver this slightly differently. And you know what? I think we can both agree when we say we appreciate that kind of feedback. And we're looking for those
Yes.
people sometimes that are going to give us that objective feedback. And I ended up meeting an editor that way too, who was just so motivated to get started. She made me feel like I was being lazy. So, it as antisocial and anti-social media as I am, I've still managed to meet people and they have gotten my work so much farther down the road than I would have gotten it by myself. I promise you. So I tell you
Yeah, I
what,
agree.
uh, I gotta thank you for meeting with us today on the indie side because I was excited to talk about a fellow fantasy enthusiast because I'm about to dump a bunch of titles on you when this video is over and implore you to maybe go take a look at them. But thank you for coming in and sharing your experience and sharing your process and especially sharing the encouragement because on the indie side, authors, illustrators, editors, we want to let them know that at whatever stage you are, we're here. We'll
Yeah.
help you get your workout. And if there's something going on, I always love having people give me feedback on my work. I always love giving feedback myself. So thank you again, Sue Mansbridge, and we do look forward to hearing more from you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be on here.